I just finished The Fourth Turning is Here, and I have to say that I appreciate some things about our culture that I didn't before. The key unique thing about our culture compared to many other cultures on the planet and historical cultures is that we believe that every generation is fresh. Like every decade is new, and things that have never happened in the past will begin to happen now. And we believe in linear progressive time where the future builds upon the past. Whereas other cultures have not had that perspective. They've had a more stable perspective. And this perspective has created more stability in their cultures and less stability in ours. One of these examples of instability is the recession cycle. Another example is the generational cycle, which is a turning or a saeculum. Saeculum is 4 generations, and it covers 90 years. And it is something that isn't appreciated by biohistory very much, but biohistory takes into account the lemming cycle, which is about 10 generations. You see this in many animals. They have cycles that last about 10 generations for themselves as well. And then we also have a huge cycle that only humans have, which is a civilization cycle. And it lasts maybe, there's no regularity to it, but about 1,000 years. But The Fourth Turning is Here made me aware more of the generational cycle than I'd ever been aware of before. And it's actually extremely interesting. So in a society where you're constantly turning away from your ancestors and your parents, you're going to have generational swings that are bigger. And I didn't really appreciate this because I wasn't part of the boomer generation that rebelled from the GI generation, and the Gen X generation, I just thought it was kind of more of the same boomer things, but I wasn't alive back then. I didn't really appreciate sort of the anarchist, nomad type personality of the Gen X, the Generation X, and millennials are somewhat kind of continuing, but technology is also a distraction, where you think that technology is determining more than it is, but there's nothing about technology that requires overprotective parenting, right? And this isn't just a civilizational thing. This is a generational thing. That this is directly from the underparenting that Gen X received, and boomers, part of their rebellion. I don't know. The generations have changed, and it has had more of an impact on our culture than just technology. I knew that technology and the things people think cause history to happen are just minor players, and then it's just population drift over time and personality and characteristics, temperament, that does the biggest work. But I really didn't appreciate the generational differences until this book. I'll just say one interesting thing about millennials is that millennials are not what people think they are. As soon as the world comes into crisis, which is coming soon because of a prolonged period of time in many nations of kind of selfish and fragmented behaviors, what we're going to see is millennials go to war and redefine civilization, basically, kind of refresh it. And it'll be different this time around, which I don't think The Fourth Turning really appreciates, because it's focused on generational cycles rather than the lemming cycle or the civilization cycle. But still, it will rhyme in a way that previous turnings have, like previous saeculums. The Fourth Turning will bring a crisis. Millennials will rise just like the World War II generation, and it will surprise everybody from before. Now, there's something interesting about the generational gaps. I remember hearing a talk. Yes, the Beware of Pride. Ezra Taft Benson, president of the Church of Jesus Christ, he said that that pride results in generation gaps. If you think about it, the linear history of trying to build the future, I identify with that a lot. There's also a component of pride. It can go too far. You can think that you can determine way more than you really can. It like the measure of man is, or the measure of creation is, man is the measure of creation. I botched that. Anyway, you know what I'm talking about. Overconfidence. So when you have this overconfidence and this gap between generations, the gap becomes worse over time, because what happens is there's generally a theme. Whatever the theme is of a generation, as long as it's not perfectly centered, which it won't be in emotional people, and there will be conflict until it does sway to one side. As soon as you have a sway to one side, the next generation is going to overcompensate. The same thing happens in individuals. When they're young, they really accentuate their primary psychological function. It is their crutch, it is their go-to. Everything they do is through it, and it's healthy to be able to rely on it. But they suppress their shadow way too much, their shadow functions. So the unconscious, let's say you're an ENTJ, extroverted thinking. What you're going to do is you're going to suppress introverted feeling, because it gets in the way of your conscious identification. Every conscious thought you identify with, introverted feeling questions it and weakens it. And so you push it more into your subconscious. This is what happened to the World War II generation. They needed extroverted thinking. They needed external results in the world, and they rebuilt society. There's like the New Deal stuff, World War II, and then everything that happened after. They were able to easily mobilize and transform the society, but there was hubris in it. And they were less understanding. Their response to the new generation's introverted feeling and self, individualism, was to double down on extroverted thinking and force a corresponding reaction of introverted feeling from the boomers. And the same thing can be said about the boomers. They doubled down instead of seeing the good in what their parents had done. They underappreciated it. Yes, they were extremely different from their parents. We have a very hard time understanding this now, but the generational gap was huge back then. So just as it is with individuals, it is with generations. When individuals fail to confront their doubts, their shadows, the nagging feelings that they're missing something, their anxiety, their stress, the thoughts they have, their dreams, when they fail to integrate their subconscious minds, they become extreme and unstable, and that is very unhealthy. The same thing happens with generations. Groups of individuals exhibiting overconfidence in their conscious preferred psychological function and neglecting to integrate the opposite side. But this depends on morality and respect for your traditions. Like, there are traditions that the GI generation probably neglected, that were more spiritual. They were more materialistic than they should have been coming out of the wars. And and then obviously the boomer generation neglected a lot of the practical traditions, the practices, like the organized religion. They really abandoned a lot of good things. But a healthy generation, a healthy individual, should be able to make peace with the father, the great father, the civilization, and the great mother, which is chaos, which is the unconscious and new things and emotions and intuition. And as a result, an individual that's balanced with a parent who is less balanced will end up not having as much of a generational gap as a kid who is imbalanced. obviously. They're not going to swing as hard. They're going to integrate more from their parents, and they'll be healthier, and the whole generation will be healthier. So what we've seen is probably declining morality resulting in a future jarring shift. Like, we're going to see something that we've never seen before. It's going to be probably even worse than the World War II generation, although aggression in general, testosterone levels have declined like crazy. So it's going to be weird. I think it's going to be overly logical and extroverted thinking, almost like a parody of the World War II generation, but without the force of will that we saw before, and without the success, probably. But there's so much going on, it's really, really impossible to predict the future. I don't know what's going to happen, but definitely, this is a component of the future that you have to be aware of to understand what's happening. It's underappreciated, and it's going to make a comeback as millennials show a side of themselves that nobody expected. So look forward to that, or dread that, however things go in the future. Personally, I'm looking forward to it. Then again, I'm a millennial, so oh my gosh, look at this idiot. Everyone's slowing down because they see police lights up there. Don't do that. Know the speed limit. Go the speed you should go. You've probably been watching my speed. I may have been inconsistent while recording, but you know what? I struggle with speaking, so it takes more effort, especially when I'm recording it. If this was a phone conversation, I wouldn't even be doing this poorly. Anyway, thanks for watching. Let me know your thoughts, and that's all. Goodbye. Oh, the one thing I forgot. I think that it's not just the generation responding to their parents' parenting style or philosophies that cause these drifts. It's also epigenetics, because I think it would make sense. It'd be perfectly rational for it to be adaptive for a human developing psychologically to prefer one psychological function over another if their parents are experiencing chronic stress, or there's some kind of signal that they are less integrated than they could be. So I think that actually is probably the primary driver of the differences in generations.